Aviation-Quest CC 101, wind 270 degrees, 10 knots, runway 27 left, cleared for takeoff.
Aviation-Quest CC 101, cleared for takeoff 27 left. V1, rotate. Positive climb.
Aviation-Quest CC Stories from Above. The views shared in this podcast are personal and for informational purposes only. They do not reflect any employer or aviation authority, and nothing discussed here should be considered flight training or regulatory guidance. Please always refer to official sources. This episode may also contain product placement. For further information, visit our website aviation-quest.cc.
This is already the 9th episode of Aviation-Quest CC, and I am Jürgen, one of the pilots in podcast command, so to say. And on the other side, as always, with me, Stefan. Hello.
Hey Jürgen, how are you today?
It's all right. It's almost, it's fall, but still there would be good glider conditions out there, I guess, today. But, are we already half part in the episode, in the topic of the episode? It's October the 21st now, and it's really a warm, beautiful autumn day here. And we said, after all these FAQ parts in the airline world, we changed the roles a little bit now.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking a lot about airliner flying, and I think it's time to hand over to you to cover your side of the aviation world where you are the expert and I know little to nothing. And so today we would like to talk about gliders. By the way, before we start, because I always forget.
No, I wouldn't have forgotten.
Okay, you're better than me then. So, if you watch on YouTube, you're gonna see a flight. Today, we're gonna join Turkish Airlines from Istanbul to London Heathrow on the Airbus A350.
And I guess the YouTube channel Aviation-Quest Podcast is also, Stefan, you would agree, maybe this time a really good opportunity to, I want to read your comments on this, because I mean, a little side note from my side before I start. What I'm sharing today is mainly from the mid 90s. So I already pointed this out in the premiere episode, that also thanks to my daddy, I was fortunate, I was really in the fortunate position to get my glider license in 1993. And certainly this is, especially when it comes to licenses, etc., old time knowledge. Even so, we did some research here. So my whole table here, my two podcast tables are covered with new paperwork. But take this from my side as a little bit of a nostalgic or inspirational look at gliding. And certainly, if you start nowadays, some education in this field, please reach out to the clubs or to go to your local airfield, get informed, get up to date. But I think gliding is still, I mean, the physics, Stefan, as you will agree, they basically, fortunate enough, didn't change since 1993. And I think the fascination of flying a glider is still the same.
Absolutely, yes. I've been fortunate enough to be in a glider once. I did 2 winch launches and then we flew around a bit and I was allowed to take control. So I think we both agree it's probably in many ways the purest form of flying where you literally have to feel the aircraft, develop a feel not just for the aircraft but for the environment around you. And it's I think, like I said, I only had a quick flight, so I didn't really get to experience it to its fullest. But I could imagine if you have many hours in a glider and you are getting really good at this, it would be a very satisfying and inspiring way of flying an aircraft.
I was also thinking about the same. And as I said, I'm looking forward really for comments. Please also feel free to fill in information where I was maybe wrong, or comment, or or ask further question. We can go also in the future podcast, maybe again more in details about this. But I was thinking about the same as you. But yeah, I mean, the purest form of flying at all for human being might be with a paraglider. I have zero experiences in this field. I once jumped out of a plane, certainly with an instructor, or with a skydiving master, I think is the right word, in skydiving, so to say, mode. But other than that, yeah, gliding, especially. I mean, I later on went to the motor glider and specialized on the motor glider because I somehow also liked this. But gliding, I mean, the first years until 1997, it's also, how should I say? It's a little bit really it's really a sport. I mean, it is a sport. There are competitions, there are even world championships, and there are, yeah, you can go into any extreme you want. You can do cross countries. Stefan, I have sent you videos from YouTube. There are, I don't know, 1,000 kilometer flights cross country. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's gliding. You can push it to every limit. There is no limit. I mean, it's just an amazing, and also there is some competition. There is some competition with yourself, because the most expensive thing is the aero tow. So the towing plane which flies with you up to the height you paid for, and then there is no more tow, and then it's up to you. You have to find the thermals, or some ridge lift, or some some upwind of other kinds, and then yeah, the longer you fly, the cheaper in the end, the flight hour, so to say. you yeah, I mean, it's up to you to lower the price of the flight hour. And it's especially for me back then as an apprentice, I was still in apprenticeship. This was highly motivated, and it was for me absolutely satisfying to fight myself up and stay for hours, for really about money wise. I think really I can say it's pocket money if I compare it with a Cessna hour, or let go of an, I don't know, I don't want to know what an hour in an A320 costs, but this is maybe also a little bit an extreme comparison.
Yes. Just before we get into licensing and stuff, did you find at the beginning when you started off, did you find this very difficult, or was it very easy to get into gliding?
I thought I had a big advantage because I was the master of disaster at my flight simulation world in the Amiga, as well as on the PC. And even there was a flight simulation game. I got it somewhere here. Maybe I find it later. It was a there I got it. It's a flight simulation, Microsoft Flight Simulator 4.0. And there I even had the opportunity to build my own planes. And I built myself gliders, and I tried to put this as realistic as it gets. But after all, as I ended up in a real plane in Styria, and the flight instructor on the very first flight, I was asking a question. He said, "You are the pilot in command. This is your plane." And it was for me, uh, yeah, absolutely clear that the advantage I thought I would have. I mean, certainly in flight simulation, you always have an advantage because you know how the controls work and everything. But after all, it's overwhelming. In the beginning, it's really overwhelming. But I mean, I had excellent flight instructors there in Styria. By the way, I'm talking of the Alpenflugschule Niederöblan. This still exists, and I think certainly they also got a homepage. The airport there, or the airfield, is Lima Oscar Golf Oscar, and it was, it was a blast. It was really, I mean, imagine this, Stefan. I was there at this first intro flight I just talked about. This took place at July 19th, 1993. And already by the end of the month, so at July 30th, I had my first solo. And then I flew like crazy a couple of days to meet the criteria for the check rides, the minimum starts. And I think there were a couple of criteria, and you also had to do some stall and spin and all kinds of tests with some certainly with the flight instructor, but already on the 4th, August the 4th was the day of my check rides. I mean, this is crazy. And certainly in this time period, there was also a lot of ground school. And back in the room, I learned like crazy. It was a blast. It was a blast. And still, I can say this really motivated. It's compared to a PPL, it's cheap. Compared to a PPL, it's cheaper, definitely much cheaper. Stephanie will agree.
Yeah.
And the success rate seems to be still super high. Especially, I can speak for nowadays, this LAPLS license. But here, I mean, the differences, there are now two licenses. Back then, there was only one. Now there's a SPL, so a sailplane pilot license, and a light aircraft pilot's license for sailplanes. Please figure this out with a local flight instructor, which license, maybe also for your local airport, local airfield, makes more sense, because there are differences. And I could imagine that somewhere in Germany, Switzerland, or it depends from the region and your goals of flying. But especially speaking of the easier, so to say, the smaller licenses, LAPLS, I just can say, go for it. So I took a view at this curriculum, and it sounds for me, just motivating. And as I said, also the figures when it comes to the euros, they are still like back then. Certainly everything got more expensive because of the inflation and everything. But it's still a blast, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a very nice and easy way to get into flying. If you don't
Yeah.
have the money for a PPL or to rent a Cessna or Warrior for, several hours every month, which, let's be honest, is very expensive, I think this is a great way to get into flying. And like I said, it actually will really make you a good pilot, because you, like you said at the beginning, you compete with yourself, you compete with the weather, and you really will get a lot of good flying skills that maybe you would never get if you just start off with powered aircraft and go from there. So I agree. I think it's an amazing hobby. Maybe even it would become your job. Who knows? If you become an instructor, and a great way to get into aviation.
By the way, for all the listeners who are maybe here in the region of Lake of Constance, Switzerland, Eastern Switzerland, or South Germany, or West Austria, the local airfield I flew off here, it's Lima Oscar India Hotel. And there I had also a great flight instructor, which later on took me to the motor glider, especially the Dimona. And I had a prolonged telephone call with him. So thank you, Helmut, for all the information. He also updated me a little bit for this podcast, maybe also for a second podcast. Let's see where maybe it's a gliding series. Stefan already said in the beginning, maybe there will be an in-depth. But his email address is flugschule at sfg-hohenems.com. So in German, flugschule at sfg-hohenems.com. And certainly you can email us on the homepage or at aviation at aviation-quest.cc, and I will forward you all the contacts. So I have still a network here of flight instructors, of experts in all the fields, and it's no problem. Just reach out for me or for us, and we will also, certainly I can forward you the telephone numbers and everything by email. I just don't want to say this here on the podcast, which is obvious. But as I said, the email address, you can ask him question if you are maybe interested in a glider license, because also here in the moment it seems they updated this flight school quite heavily throughout the last years. It's possible to make also here the glider license. Back then it was just more straightforward for me, much more straightforward in Styria. But the first steps I would recommend to everybody who is interested or maybe interested in this field of aviation, go to your local airfield, talk nicely to the people, don't be annoying or don't, ask for. I think, Stefan, this is always a good idea, not to run into an airfield and say, hey, I'm here. Be a little bit cautious, and they will normally welcome you anyway, and then maybe take the chance of an introduction flight. So a good a good timing for this would be a warm day on a weekend. So really a beautiful day on a weekend when there is glider activity. Take an intro flight and speak to a flight instructor, and I think then you get all the complete local and for your individual situation optimized information about licensing, etc.
Yes, and I think one thing that's very interesting about the gliding thing is because it's not a commercial enterprise, it's a hobby. Uh, the range of age you can do this is enormous. When I did my gliding experience flight, I did it in the UK. My instructor was an American lady, and she was, I believe, if I remember correctly, 73 years old. So she'd been gliding, I don't know for how many, not years, decades, super experienced woman. But so this is not something where, like in the world of commercial flying, you have to stop at a certain point. And the great thing is you don't have to be in your mid 20s. You can actually be much, much younger. So you can even fly gliders before you even have a driver's license. So I think it's a very accessible hobby, a very nice and accessible way to enter the world of flying aircraft.
I had my glider's license over a year before I got my my driver's license for a car.
So you were flying before you were driving.
Certainly, and I was somehow a late starter because I was 17. I mean, I could have done it a year earlier, but also my daddy agreed that, I mean, before this I was into RC planes and flight simulation and was quite ambitioned in this field. And 17 was for me the perfect age. But you can solo. Stefan, you have seen it in the paperwork I've sent to you with 14. I mean, I was just thinking, what an advantage this must be also maybe for somebody who is thinking about a career like you have now in the airline industry. I mean, it's a pure form of flying. You learn certainly a lot about the weather, and also, yeah, you have air law, you have airframes and systems, you have aerodynamics, just to read a little bit about this curriculum from the ground school. Then we have certainly navigation and flight planning. Human performance also plays a big factor because up there, you have no pressure, no such thing like a pressurized cabin or something. Then you have operational procedures, certainly, and mass and balance. Communication is also a part, and say there was a lot of safety and airmanship, as I remember. Yeah, this is, I mean, is it exaggerated to say it's a little bit a mini PPL? Certainly, there's nothing about engines. I mean, but the rest of it, I think it's a solid foundation for a professional career or for the further steps, maybe PPL, CPL, whatever, or into a, as you did, into a, so to say, complete education as an airline pilot.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, because you are flying in the same airspace as, airliners and all the other things. So you need to learn all about the weather, probably even have a better understanding about the weather than airline pilots, because we have weather radar and all that stuff that helps us out. You have none of these things, so you
Meteorology, as far as I remember, sorry for
yeah,
interrupting you, but this was a main part. At least in my so some of my memories from back then might have been blurred a little bit, but it was for me also the most impressive thing we had a lot of calculations about clouds and also how this specific wind. You also got known in Innsbruck, the specific wind from the south, the Föhn wind, how this works and why it's colder in Italy and then warmer down here. And it was, for me, this was super interesting stuff.
Yes, yeah, I love that too. And I think if you are in a glider, you are a lot more at the mercy of your environment than you are in any other aircraft. If I take this to the extreme, and now I need to double check this, but I think I've got this right. Back in the 1980s, maybe early 1990s, there was a Air Canada Boeing 767 that ran out of fuel, and they actually had to glide the aircraft to a race course, and they managed to land, and everybody got out safely, even though they had to glide the aircraft for a very long time. And I believe I got this right. The pilot flying that plane had a glider license, and he actually used some aerodynamic tricks to get the aircraft exactly where they wanted it to be. I'm going to double check this, but I'm pretty sure I got this right. They even made a whole movie about it because so what I'm trying to say is this: any skill you learn in aviation, maybe you will, it will never be a waste. It'll always be useful in one sense or another. I mean, this is an extreme case, but you never know.
I have seen another YouTube video. I think it was on this Mentor Pilot channel. There was a Boeing. I think it was a jumbo, Boeing 747. As far as I know, we both here, we cannot double check. We just speak out of our mind on podcast. But there was some volcano activity going on, and they were almost some, so to say, I think they were without engine. There was also a lot of things was going wrong, and in the end there was a super happy end. And also there the captain was a glider, and this was all, this played a huge part where why nothing, as I said, I remember a happy end. Nothing happened at all, but there were quite impressive pictures about the plane afterwards. I think there was a lot of ash and volcano. After that, they somehow discovered this whole danger zone of a volcano. I think this was also an incident or accident which somehow brought new attention to, or it's, yeah, in aviation, it's sometimes that also happy ends can increase the safety afterwards.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, you're right. I remember that. I think it was a British Airways 747, and they
I
lost,
think, yeah.
yeah, they lost all four engines, which means they had to glide the thing. And I do think if you've flown gliders, if you're used to it, if you're used to the sensation of flying without engines, you understand, your lift, drag, curve, and all that stuff. I do think that would, in a situation like this, would be super helpful. Something, unfortunately, I personally have no experience in. So I do think like I said, any skill you learn in aviation is never wasted. It's always good to have. And even I fully agree with what you said. If you want to become a commercial pilot and you cannot wait to get to your seat, your bum into a seat of an aircraft, you can start gliding super early. It's not expensive, and it will give you very, very valuable experience and exposure to flying for later on.
I mean, was for me also was really impressive here to be really a pilot in command with 17, because I was really in the beginning, I was a little bit overwhelmed, and also, but I learned to control myself pretty fast because you have to think far ahead of the aircraft. And I think this is super to learn in a glider, because a glider, you really have to fly this plane strategically. And yeah, it's hard to explain in words, but it's a special experience of being really responsible for yourself, for the plane, and for the other gliders. They are that are sometimes really close to you, but there are rules, and you have to take care of these rules, also safety rules. I mean, nowadays there seem to be even, I mean, certainly this is a good thing, some FLARM, it's called FLARM, um, some collision warning system is in place. This seems to be a combination of radio and GPS, but certainly this is still, I think, certainly it's combined with the general rules. And back then, there was just the general rules and your view, and I never had something like a near miss situation or anything. There was, from my perspective, I can also say I never had anything close to an incident or something. I was really, also the flight instructor also respected me as a really safe pilot. On the other hand, I was not really willing to take any risks. I had no no outlanding at all. So many gliders will now say, "Hey, what are you?" No, I didn't went or I didn't go cross country or something. For me, the flying here in the local area was more than adventure enough. Later on, I went to the motor glider. And here is also one point, the glider adventure you define on your own. If you want to go to the extreme and fly to Italy or across the Alps or fly aboard or in competitions, that's up to you. But if you are just like me, a weekend glider, enjoy it and maybe get a little bit farther away or have your own your own goals, maybe to stay up an hour longer or something like this. That's fine, nobody will judge you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the beauty of the whole hobby, I think. It's not just a very beautiful way of flying. You are in control of everything. You can decide how long you want to stay up, what you want to do. If you don't like the weather, you just don't go flying, and that's it. In the commercial world, you don't have that option. It doesn't matter what the weather's like, you go flying. So um, I think, like I said earlier, I think it's a great way of learning how to fly. It's a beautiful part of aviation, and who knows? Maybe one day I'll go back and spend a few more hours in gliders, because I do think it's a very cool way of flying and a very nice experience overall, without any engines, just completely silent. And one question for you, because you mentioned you have to fly strategically, you have to plan ahead. How would you plan an approach? Because, as we often have said on this podcast, there is no go around in a glider. It's either it works or it doesn't. Do you have certain markers in terms of altitude that you have to hit from the airfield, or how do you do that?
How could I forget about this? This was the way I wanted to start this podcast, Stefan. Now you got me. I'm confused now. I wanted to start with our running joke that came up, but I can say it like this. Um, it was. I spent a few days flight simulation wise at your home back then home in Great Britain. It was in late 2007, and there I think I already gave you a little bit an idea. Yeah, I mean a short story short, but I think we will talk about this in detail in the next podcast. But certainly, I want to answer your question. There's a traffic pattern. There's also instruction for every airfield. You really hear also when I came back from flight school, I had several flights with instructors. They trained me about the local fields and also where there were alternatives. If the runway is blocked or something like this, because physiologically it's clear that you cannot go around with a glider. And but there are different altitudes you have to be at the downwind leg as well as the base leg, and then you go to the final leg, and then you have an aiming point, and the rest is controlled with the air brakes, but I think I can go a little bit more in detail about this in the next podcast. What do you think about this? But is this a short and somehow makes this answer sense, or should I go into more detail here?
No, no, makes perfect sense. So basically, you have a traffic pattern like we do in the commercial
I think
world.
it's like when you do a
Yeah,
visual approach. I think it's somehow I guess also you there have a aiming point and you fly the plane to the runway.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I made a whole video about that on my channel, how we actually use the computer to draw circles, and we can use the circles by the 1 in 3 rule, you know. Yeah, I don't want to go into mathematics now. This is not the place where you can calculate for each circle what altitude you need to be, and then you aim for each circle on the screen, and you be at that altitude, and then you will be landing exactly on the runway. So I guess you do a similar thing where you know your altitudes at which point, and you adjust the pitch accordingly so that you hit each altitude at that exact point in the pattern. And then you know when you come into land, you're going to be at the right altitude and the right speed. I presume I got that right?
I mean, you got positions where to start a traffic pattern. I mean, this is logic, like in the PPL. You know, a beam the runway or a beam the tower, and then you also have your radio call certainly, and then you have certainly the wind have to be because you cannot fly the downwind leg endless because otherwise you will get in trouble. But the landing is one of the main parts in flight school. You really got proficient in landing, and you get an ideal an altitude where to start the downwind pattern, and as I said, also to cross the what is it? What is it? It's not the cross, the downwind leg, and then certainly the base leg, and in the final leg you adjust it with the flaps. But as I said, I would like to go into more detail because this is maybe also an interesting topic for you. But certainly you can dream in a glider of some computer and head-up display which show you circles. You
But that would take away the fun, right? So let's be honest.
uh,
You want to
I
feel
mean,
what's
maybe there is nowadays a glider with a head-up display, but I really think this is not the point of gliding. I mean, you can put everything to extreme, but it's and by the way, I think it's not rocket science to land a glider. So if you are enthusiastic about it, don't think too much. You will learn it at the flight school. So this is really sorry. Yeah, it's. I think it's very straightforward, and an advantage is also that glider in landing mode or so. I mean, landing configuration is relative because a lot of the gliders don't have landing flaps. At least, yeah. I mean, the Blanik had landing flaps, even Fowler flaps. The first glider I flew here, but the others they come in, so to say, clean, relative clean, because you have the air brakes. But I can go into more details. But they generally the stall speed, so the landing speed is really super slow. But I can do a little bit more research about this. But I think as a first introduction into landing a glider, what I said makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think we should do another podcast where you tell us a bit more about maybe how to find thermals, how to use them, how to land, how to plan ahead. Personally, I would be super interested in that. To hear from someone who's actually done it, how you operate a glider efficiently.
Yeah, and certainly also with the right start, I missed completely today. What about our running joke in England with a glider always goes around? Sorry, a glider never goes around. Maybe also you can come up with some nice stories from those days when we were simming in England.
Yes, exactly. But good. Well, thank you so much for all your insight. And I think we should carry on with one more podcast where we talk a bit more, like in detail, how a glider is actually flown. I would personally be very interested in that. And yeah, so I think today you can say goodbye to our listeners. So thank you from my side. And Jürgen?
Sounds like a plan, Stefan. Let's make a second part of gliding or on gliding. And as I said, if there are any specific questions to me, also, as I said, the contact to my network, just go to our homepage, aviation-quest.cc. There's an email address and reach out. And also the YouTube channel, Aviation-Quest Podcast. There is a comment section. And also there, feel free to post some comments and we will take care of them. Okay, thank you and talk to you next time, Stefan.
Okay, bye bye.
Thank you for listening to Aviation Quest CC Stories from Above. For more information about this episode and everything we do, visit our homepage aviation-quest.cc. We appreciate your time and support, and we'd love to have you back for the next episode. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and keep your passion for aviation flying high.